Hi, hello, I'm Hal. Welcome back to my channel. Something a little bit different. The angle's slightly different because I am actually sitting down on the chest of drawers that I tend to film against. Just for a bit more of a sit-down, chatty video because I want to do the mid-year book freakout tag today. I just thought that was a bit more conducive to the vibes. You can actually see my hands as I talk, rather than just one of them. I have obviously been someone who watches book videos for a while. I've seen this go around quite a bit. I ended up taking my list of questions from, and cross-referencing from a couple of different people. I'm not sure exactly who originated the book tag, but pretty well known. Basically everyone's done it. So yeah, I just wanted to have a chat through the books that I really enjoyed in kind of the first half of the year. I know I'm slightly late. I know it's like mid-July, and I'm not there. In at least one case, I'm going to talk about a book, that the status of whether or not I've read this book may have changed this month. So I'm trying to base my answers on a little bit earlier on in the month to kind of consider the first 6 months kind of all together. So, we'll see how this goes. I was just really busy and I've got a full-time job, so it is what it is. The first question is the best books that I've read so far in 2025. I can have 3 that I wanted to talk about, so we're gonna go from most recent. I don't think these are in red order or anything like that, but the most recent book that I read that I really, really enjoyed this year was A Secret History, which if you watched my last video, I did talk about in length, but this is kind of one of the original Dark Academia novels. I would also specifically say it's kind of like a mystery crime thriller novel. We are following our main character, Richard Papin, as he manages to get into this prestigious elite liberal arts college in Vermont and manages to get out of his little podunk town in California. And he gets there, he gets entangled with this group of Greek students who basically only have classes with this one professor. And things get a little bit more complicated. There maybe are some murders that happen during this course of this book. This was so much fun. I do keep thinking about this book, especially because it's been a book that I've known about for a really long time. I know people who have read it and really enjoyed it. And as someone who's read some really bad Dark Academia and, has some issues with the glamorization of that Dark Academia aesthetic, which, happened primarily on Tumblr.com, a website I am still active on. I have certain ideas of what's fun and what isn't, unfortunately. But this was really fun. I really enjoyed that more crime, personal relationships forming and then imploding kind of things. It really is the blueprint that a lot of other novels in this style is based on, and they've not done it as well as Donna Tart. I really enjoyed her writing style. I am definitely interested in checking out other things that she has written. I had a really good time. That was such an easy book almost to get through, even though it's, quite chunky and not all I love the writing style. I really enjoyed that book. It definitely kind of gave me a little insight into, what people are copying from and taking inspiration from, but they did not manage to, do as well as Donna Tart, think, in my opinion. The next book that I want to talk about was something that I own, The Hymn to Dionysus by Natasha Pulley. This is it's being marketed as a Greek mythotelling. I still don't know if it actually is, but it is set in a mythological ancient Greece. We follow our main character Phaedrus, who is coming back to Thebes after the battles of Troy. He is a commander in the military, and he has this old promise to a god he's, going through it and calls this kind of god back to Thebes. Things start going wrong in the city. There starts to be this madness overtaking the city, and he forms this relationship with Dionysus, who he meets as this like mysterious witch character. This was great. I really enjoyed it. Again, if you don't know me, I am a huge Natasha Pulley fan, so I was really excited for this book to come out. I think that she did a really good job of creating something new, almost, in this space. You can really, I think she has a sense of place and time that you can see, across all of her books, and once again did a really good job with it. And yeah, I love the relationships in this. I love the ideas that we're investigating. This book is going to come up again for some very specific reasons as well throughout this. But yeah, again, I really enjoyed this. One of my favourites this year. The only thing that kind of tops that, which I believe I did read in the same month, was Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang. I did read this as an audiobook, but I enjoyed it so much that I then went out to get a copy of this book. So in this book, we are following our main character, Siona, who is basically a grad student. She is, she's gone through a university kind of course to learn magic and how to, do magic. And she's been on an internship in magical industry, and she wants to take her Archmage exam and become one of the Archmages and kind of set up her own laboratory and do research and things like that. But no other woman has ever become an Archmage. And so she kind of wants to be the first to ever do it, and she does. And then things get a lot more complicated from there because she learns a lot more about the inner workings of magic and the society. Maybe there's an uncomfortable truth there with how they treat one of the ethnic minority that also lives in this city, because we're in a big domed city with, a magical curse outside of it. I really enjoyed this. Did I know exactly where this book was going to go 2 chapters into this novel, once I got an idea of the setting and things like that? Yeah, absolutely. But the writing was so good. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters in this. Like I mentioned, I read this as an audiobook, and it was narrated by Maura Quirk, who I think is amazing. But with the writing and the narration, I'm not someone who can visualize things. I would call myself as someone who has aphantasia, as a TLDR, but I can sometimes visualize things, but it takes a lot of effort, and it tends to be visualization of images that I've already seen. But the first, the prologue bit of this book, I could see that in my brain in a very real way that doesn't happen to me that often. And so from that point, I was completely immersed and obsessed with this world. So I really enjoyed it, and yeah, those I would say are the best books that I've read so far this year. The next question is the best sequel that I've read in 2025 so far. It's a bit more complicated. There were a couple of books that I read that were directly sequels, but there were also a couple of books that are the 3rd or the 4th book in the series and things like that. So I don't have a good answer for this one. I did read the Book of the Ancestor series in the first half of 2025, and I really enjoyed that. The Book of the Ancestor series, we're following our main character, Nona Grey, who is literally saved from her execution, and she is taken to a convent, the Convent of Sweet Mercy, to learn more about, firstly as a place to keep her safe, but then she finds out that she does have some magical abilities, learning a bit more about them and what part she's going to play kind of in the history of this world, which is a planet orbiting a dying star. It is very sci-fi in the way that everyone on this world also originally came from a different planet, and basically came to this abandoned planet and took over. There are some sci-fi elements that definitely come throughout the series, which made it really fun. And I do think that the sequel and the 3rd book in that series, which I believe are Grey Sister and Holy Sister respectively, that they were both really good books. They did a great job of continuing where the first book kind of left off in terms of setting up the world. I did really enjoy how in Grey Sister we saw a bit more of the world external to the convent, and we got a couple of other points of view and a lot more of that like politicking, which I really enjoy. Also, I did also enjoy Holy Sister and how that whole series wrapped up as well. The other kind of really good sequel that I've read in the first half of the year was The Monster, sometimes called The Monster Cormorant by Seth Dickinson, which I read recently. That one's a little bit different because I did read the first book in the series like about 1.5 years ago, so it was a bit more difficult to get back into the world because it is quite complicated. The Monster is the second book in, I believe, also a trilogy. It's a fantasy series. We are following our main character, Baru Cormorant. When she is a young girl, the Falkreath Empire comes to her little kind of island nation and basically systematically destroys their, culture, their like trade, their currency, how they bring up their children, they bring diseases, things like that, in a purposeful attempt to take over and colonize this island and, indoctrinate all of their citizens into the way of the Falkreath Empire. And Baru kind of is like, oh, I'm gonna take this, she gets this opportunity to study and become a part of the Falkreath Empire, and she wants to use that opportunity to kind of take it apart from within. The first book, we spend a lot of it in, she gets sent to a country called Arduin to work as an accountant for the Empire, and we follow all of the politics and things she gets mixed up in there and how everything there plays out. In the sequel, in The Monster, she is now in a position of a lot more power, which also puts a lot more eyes on her, and she is dealing with the fallout of her actions in that first book. So there's a lot more politics going on. There's a lot more like on-page stuff going. I felt like in the first book it was a bit more unreliable what was really going on, whereas this felt a little bit more on page. And she's going through it as well, which is always fun. We get a couple of other perspectives and we see how everything's kind of really complicated and interwoven. This was really fun. I love a book that makes me feel like I'm doing a workout while I'm reading it, when it's good. When it's good politics and things like that, not because I can't understand it, if you know what I mean. And this definitely fell in the category of this is really complicated, and just genuinely I had a really good time. The last book that I want to talk about in this little section is The Golden Raven by Nora Sakavic. This is technically the 5th book in the All for the Game series, but it is the second book. It's, like a sequel to The Sunshine Court, where we are focusing more on Jeremy Knox and Jean Moreau. So this is a, contemporary sports mafia book series focusing on the made-up sport of Xe. Don't worry about it. And basically in The Sunshine Court, we see Jean basically get forcibly kidnapped out of the sports cult that he was in and start his process of healing and coming, learning how to live outside of that very specific situation. And a lot of that is done, initially kind of with the Foxes, who are the team that we spend the first 3 books following, and then in California with the USC Trojans. So where we also meet, our other main character, who's Jeremy, who I'm obsessed with. So we get that kind of setup in the first book. We get a lot of like slice of lifey stuff over kind of the summer period, I would say, before we start into the actual scholastic year and sports year in the second book in The Golden Raven. I really enjoyed this. I think the main things that I was going into this book trying to get out of it were like, I wanted to know what was going on in Jeremy's head, please. And also I wanted to have more, what I initially thought was plots, but what I really meant was Xe scenes, because they are the action equivalent in this book. the plot's there is a plot, it's very slow. And it's, you know, otherwise building romantic tension. But that was also really fun. I really enjoyed John learning to play with the Trojans, who have this very good sportsmanship vibe to them. They have never gotten a red card, and having someone who's come from a very aggressive playstyle, learning how to fit in with them. Obviously, the continuation of the relationship between Jean and all the other Trojans. Jeremy, my baby boy, we will get you out of there. Please. I had a really fun time. Like, in a real way, this has taken over my life. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's just odd because it's technically the 5th book in this series, kind of thing. The next question is like new releases that you haven't read yet but really want to. This is difficult because I do think there's a lot of like 2025 new releases that I'm like at so far that I'm really excited I have to read. I think the main thing was obviously like, you know, The Hint of Dionysus I was really excited for and had pre-ordered. Blood Over Brighthaven was interesting, and then when I picked it up I absolutely loved. But most other things have kind of been okay so far. There's nothing that I'm like desperate to read that's come out this year. There is quite a lot of things that I'm asking from the library for and will be picking up, but I don't have this like deep desire to read it. The main things that I was thinking about when I was considering this question were a little bit earlier releases. So one of them, and that was kind of on the top of my list, was Yield Under Great Persuasion by Alexandra Rowland. Hysterically, between the time that I put this on here to discuss and now, I have actually read this book. So you've got that to look forward to. But this, I did read a different book by Alexandra Rowland, which was A Taste of Golden Iron, which I absolutely loved last year. You can tell because I now have an art print with art for the 2 characters that's living on my wall. I can give you a good summary of it because I have actually read it. This is like a cozy gay fantasy romance book. We're following our 2 main characters, Tam Beckett and Nikolai Leifort, and what if we were both boys and when we were 9, you knocked over the giant marrow that I was growing to please the Angra, the god of love and fertility and like harvest, and it broke into a million pieces. And I got kind of scolded and not comforted for this thing, so I decided to hate you forever because we are both 9, and I feel like this set up a pattern of behaviour where my, I worked really hard and every time no one like comforted me. So that's Tam's whole deal. So very like one-sided intense hatred with this other man who he has been having sex with for the past 10 years. And what happens if they are put into a situation where 1, they have to talk a little bit more, 2, he finds out that like Leifert is one of Angrat's favourites and that Angrat wants him to get his shit together and, maybe stop yanking, Nikolai's like feelings around and stuff like that. So Tam goes on this journey in this book to try and be a better person, and it's difficult for him because he's a goblin of a man. The next book that I think fits this category is Most Ardently by Gabe called Novoa. This, if you've not heard about it, is like a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but what if Elizabeth Bennet was actually a gay trans man called Oliver, still set in the same time period and setting. But I think they're slightly younger in this, as far as like I've seen reviews about it. And so it's, like a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, but gay and trans. I do really want to check this out. I am now finally on a wait list for this and have been for quite a while, for a couple of months. And I am getting closer to the end of that hold list, but it's probably still going to take me a little bit of time to actually get my hands on this book. I don't know a huge amount about it because I've not read it yet. The next book as well that I think falls into this category is something that I actually do own, and it's Rose House by Arkady Martine. I read what was it? The Texcalan series by Arkady and Martine, which is obviously a memory called Peace and Desolation called Empire, whichever way around those two books are. And I really, really enjoyed it. It's the kind of sci-fi bullshit that I love and adore. When I saw that they were, you know, in like a little short novella by Arkady and Martine, I was really excited for it. I ended up finding this secondhand for like a couple of pounds, so I had to pick it up. I believe this is about, what if there's a murder in a house which is also a sentient AI which is not telling you what's going on? That's all I know. All I know it's by an author that I really enjoy. And it's weird sci-fi bullshit. And that's all I needed to know. And when I saw it going for cheap, I did pick it up. So I am really excited to read that at some point, hopefully. And the next question is most anticipated releases for the second half of the year. There are kind of two big ones. I am really excited to read Katabasis by R.F. Kuang. This is one of the books that I have actually pre-ordered to get a copy of. I really enjoy R.F. Kuang's work in general. The very brief summary is two rival students have to go down to hell to try and rescue their advisor. And it sounds good. I'm excited, you know. I'm excited for it. The other book that I have actually pre-ordered that comes out in the second half of the year is The Rosefield by Phillip Pullman, which is the third book in the Book of Dust series. The only issue with that is I have not actually read The Secret Commonwealth yet, even though I have bought the like expensive exclusive slipcases from Waterstones. Don't ask me about my life choices, but that will be arriving at some point, and I assumingly will read it at some point. Don't ask me any further follow-up questions. And the other book, this is very up in the air, but if the next book in the Author the Game series comes out by the end of the year, I'm really excited for that. So if that comes out, if that's a release for the second half of the year, fantastic. If it's not, I'm happy to wait for as long as it takes. And then another kind of silly one is I'm actually excited for Running Close to the Wind, which is another Alexandra Rowland book, to come out in paperback, because then I might actually buy a copy of that and try and read it, because I've not had any luck getting it from a library or anything like that. And seeing that my copy of A Taste of Gold and Iron is in paperback, I want them to match. The next question is biggest disappointment of the year. I do have a couple here. So one of them was Dark Star Burning, Ash Falls White by Amelie Zhao. This is the sequel to Song of Silver, Flame Like Night, which I read in 2023, which I really, really enjoyed. We're following our main character Lan, who she's living in kind of a fantastical, Chinese-inspired setting, which has recently been conquered by this race called the Atlanteans, and she's working as a song girl until she runs into this other guy, Zen, who wakes up this, magical power inside of her, and they go to, a school to learn more about this, and she develops the power and stuff like that. The first book, at least, is very this is a wuxia novel. We have a wuxia type school arc, and I really enjoyed it because of that. I had a great time with it. I thought it was really fun. Wuxia and Zanxia stories are stuff that I enjoy. I watch The Untamed, I have an interest in this type of storytelling, but I was really disappointed in the second book in this series. I felt like the pacing for this was really off. It felt like it was two books that had been crammed together into one, and so we didn't have time to explore and resolve all the emotional beats that the author was trying to do in this story. It just felt rushed. There was definitely at the midpoint, I could see how that first half of the book could have been a book, and it could have been expanded, and the relationships, and the second half of the book as well. And that would have made the relationships that we do see in this book, the one between Lan and Zen, which ends up, the first book ends in a very rocky place. The relationships with new characters that we meet don't feel flashed out enough for, if there's for example, a betrayal to happen, that also felt earned, or an emotional moment in this book to happen. Again, things like that. Just like a massive disappointment on that route. And yeah, it just felt like the story resolved in a very stereotypical way as well, which wasn't great. But I will say I still enjoyed the world building and some of the god aspects in this and things like that. The next book that I wanted to mention was Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Ha Lee. Yeah, Yoon Ha Lee, which is a kind of fantasy, dystopian, book where we're following our main character who they live in kind of like a fantastical Korea, which is being invaded by a fantastical Japanese force. We follow our main character Jian Yebi, who they want to be a painter, but when they fail out of the Ministry of Art program, they instead end up being recruited by the Ministry of War to basically paint symbols on these masks to animate automatons, and one of these automatons is a giant dragon kind of figure. And Yebi develops a relationship with the dragon automa and some of the other people around them, and things become under tension. There's possibly a resistant move and things like that. The thing is, this is a very decent book. I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was good, etc. However, I had previously read the Nine Fox Gambit books by Yoon Ha Lee, and I absolutely loved those. Those are very high sci-fi bullshit. They're in the category of sci-fi books that I really love, which is talking about identity and having multiple for sci-fi reasons, multiple consciousnesses in one person kind of thing, or the other way around. And I thought that they were really fun and really well done, and that cool combination of heavy, dense sci-fi politic books with lots of action and things like that. Whereas this was just middle of the road. So it was a huge disappointment because I previously really enjoyed this author's work, and this was not up to standard to what I had previously read, basically. It was my main issue with this book. There's nothing inherent. I mean, I do feel like Yebi is a pretty stationary character in a very real way. They did not feel like they were taking a lot of actions in their own story, that they were very passive to other things happening to them and reactive to some of them, but generally just letting things pass them by kind of thing. I guess is less disappointment, just one that I, was looking forward to based off some reviews and then did not end up enjoying that much, which was The Woods All Black by Lee Mandelo. I just didn't think that this was a horror book, which is what it's put out to be. It's a short horror novella following our main character Leslie, who goes to this little town as part of the Frontier Nursing Service, but instead gets a lot of resistance from this town, and they're very kind of fundamentally Christian kind of church setting, and there's possibly also something creepy in the woods. But I didn't think that either of those elements were actually done in a way that was actually horrifying or scary. The next question was biggest surprise for this year. And I do have a couple of these which are, more positive. So I think one of them that was definitely a big surprise to me was Evocation by S.T. Gibson. I literally picked up this book, not expecting a lot of it, expecting for it to be something that I didn't like and to kind of be a bitch about it. I'm gonna be so honest, I picked it up with the worst bitches of intentions, and instead I end up really enjoying myself. This is an urban fantasy in which we're following our main character, David Aristarkov, I think, who is a high-powered medium with his fancy job, and he ends up getting possessed by a spirit that he didn't want to, and he kind of has to go, oh, maybe there's something to that urban legend my family tells about one of our ancestors pledging his soul to the devil, and has to team up with his ex-boyfriend and his ex-boyfriend's new wife to try and solve what's going on. And obviously that's a whole situation, which is a lot of this book. This is very much, part of it is that trying to work together, but a lot of it is the relationship between these characters and things like that, which I thought was incredibly juicy and interesting and well done. So that was a big surprise that I enjoyed it, because I went into it not expecting to at all. I'm actively looking forward to reading the second book at this point. I guess you could put that into like most anticipated releases as well, like Ascension, but I'm not planning to really, if I'm going to be picking it up because I bought it, I'm not planning to do that until the paperback comes out. So yeah, had a great time. The next one, I kind of mentioned it a little bit when I was talking about the Secret History as one of the best books of the year. I really enjoyed The Secret History. That was a surprise. I similarly really enjoyed If We Were Villains, which again, considering that I have deep issues with how the Dark Academia aesthetic happened on Tumblr.com, I didn't think I was going to enjoy these books. I thought that they were going to exemplify the worst parts of those, and instead they're just really fun romps into these terrible people's psyche as they make terrible decisions at their pretentious universities. And it's a good time. They are very similar types of books. They are both like people reflecting on a friendship group that they had that imploded following a murder. But I do think that they do them in different ways and they're focusing on different things. The Secret History is looking at that. Firstly, there's more crimes that go on in The Secret History in a very real way. I was obsessed with everything that happened there. But they're Greek classical students, so you're looking at things through that lens, whereas in If We Were Villains, they are Shakespearean students, so you're looking at things through a more Shakespearean tragedy lens. Very similar, but different in some very important ways. And then the last book that I wanted to mention was The Darkness Outside of Us by Elliot Schrafer. I had a very specific idea about what this book was going to be in my mind. This is a young adult sci-fi novel where we follow our two characters who both think that they've been sent up onto this space mission to go to one of Jupiter's moons, and they think that they've done it. They're both on this spaceship alone until the AI of the ship basically tells them, no, there's someone else and you need to work together. And I thought this was going to be a very abandoned in space kind of book, and it goes some really interesting places, and there's a lot more going on than what I expected going into this book, and it really surprised me in a really good way, and I ended up really enjoying it. The next question is favorite new author. I don't really have a good answer to this. If you'd asked me this last year, I would have said Natasha Pulley. But I don't have a Natasha Pulley equivalent for this year, if that makes sense. Like I mentioned a little bit with The Secret History, I am very interested in picking up some more things by Donna Tart. I read a lot of authors that I'd already read and have, opinions about. I believe I read my first KJ Charles book this year, which sounds insane because I've heard so much about KJ Charles books, but that's mainly from my friend telling me the entire plot. Definitely interested to check out more from KJ Charles as well, but it's not that same all-consuming I must read every book from their backlist that I had with Natasha Pulley last year. The next question is technically newest fictional crush. I'm not someone who that happens, I'm not someone who that happens to, I'm not a romantic, but I just don't put myself in those situations. I am very much a shipper first and self-inserter never kind of thing. I care about these characters being in an interesting relationship more than I think of a character in themselves being someone to have a crush on. In terms of my favourite relationships that I read, Him to Dionysus, I really enjoyed Phaedrus and Dionysus in that. Dionysus is such a interesting, cool character. I want to put him in a bottle and shake him. Obviously, if this was not newest, Jeremy and Jean would be winning this category, but that's not new to me. I did also really enjoy the little bit of romance that is in Blue of Brighthaven, Tommel and Siona, but I'm going to talk about Siona later. Don't worry about it. And yeah, I think... Oh, and I really enjoyed Luca and Matty from Sword Crossed. which is a book I read at the beginning of the year, and I really did enjoy the relationship there, even if I had some issues with the pacing of how that happened. The next question is newest favourite character, and I think the winner in this by far is Sayona from Blood Over Brighthaven. I love her so much. She's just such a, study her like a bug character. I love that she is this very, blunt and kind of unlikable, very ambitious female character who spends her whole time being like, I'm not nice, and she is. There is a part of her that is nice and caring underneath all of that. But even when she's doing things that are, good, in the sense of, the story in the world, she's still coming from, a selfish place. She wants to put her mark on the world in whatever way she has to. And I love the journey that she goes on in this book. And yeah, she just, in a real way, like a little goblin. I loved her. She was absolutely fantastic. Insane evil women. Not insane evil women, but insane little woman. I'm obsessed with her. I will say that Dionysus was also great. Truly a vibe to him that I really enjoyed as well. But Sayona reigns supreme. In a real way, have not been able to stop thinking about her. The next question is book that made you cry. Shout out to Darkness Outside of Us, which made me cry several times throughout the course of this book. I did go into that book expecting to cry, I will say. I did not expect the amount of times that I was going to cry in that book because of the aforementioned what I thought was going to happen versus what actually was happening. But the winner in this category has to be the Hymn to Dionysus, because in a very real way, I sobbed through the last 10% of this book. Ugly, sobbing, crying on my bed at 1 a.m, emotionally drained, having a headache from how hard I was crying, etc., etc. It's not even that sad, is the real part about this. It's I was just very emotional about this book. I loved the message that Natasha Pulley was trying to write through this book. I think it ended really well. Destroyed me in a real way. The next question is book that made you happy. For this, I was thinking about the Warrior Cats graphic novel that I had read earlier this year. This was so much fun. It's very it's a middle grade book about cats who go outside to become warriors. Well, we follow our main character, Firepaw, then Fireheart, who is a kitty pet that goes outside to join the warriors in the forest. And, cat drama happens. This was so cute. I think the art in this is lovely. I felt like it was I've not read the original novels, but I think that the graphic novel was definitely the way to go as someone who could not sit through reading a middle grade book at my age. I had a really fun time in this. Yeah, it was cute. It made me happy. The next question is most beautiful book you've bought so far this year. I don't have a good answer to this. I haven't bought any special editions. Last year I had the Foxhole Court, all for the game special editions. But this time we're more looking at normal books I bought. I do really love the cover to the Hymn to Dionysus, as well as the cover to Blood Over Brighthaven. I think these are both really cool covers, and that's part of the reason why I own both of these books. I mean, I was going to buy this one anyway because of my Natasha Pulley collection. And then another book that I did end up buying because I enjoyed it, but also I really liked the cover and everything, was When Among Crows by Veronica Roth. I just think that this is a really cool cover, and I think that the second one in this series also has a cool cover, and I thought it would be fun to collect them. This is the Waterstone special edition, so it does have a cross on the front of it, and end papers and stuff. I don't know if these are in other versions of the hardback book, but yeah, I think it's nice, unfortunately. So I did end up picking Like those I would say fall into that category. And then the last question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? There are a couple that I do think I need to read by the end of the year. I do have some books on my shelves now that I have not read, so I would love to read Rose House by the end of the year. I ended up picking a copy of Winter's Orbit by Everina Maxwell that I also want to pick up. I would love to read Running Close to the Wind by the end of the year. Don't know if that's going to happen. Yeah, there's a couple of books that I do want to read by the end of the year. It's mostly things that probably are on my shelves or are going to be on my shelves. I would obviously consider all the books that I have in my like anticipated releases section, but I tend to pick stuff up from the library like 90% of the time, so it's going to be a bit dependent on what actually comes in. In terms of things that like are on my library holds, The Tyrant by Seth Dickinson I do have, All Our Infinite Fates by Laura Stephen, Heavenly Bodies by Imani Erihu, The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig, I'm sure this Malice by Jongwin. I think those are the main things that I'm getting as physical copies from my library, and then I have a bunch of like holds on Libby that should come in at some point. So yeah, it'll be whatever I end up picking up. I'm pretty like, I never go into anything with like a specific TBR or anything like that. So yeah, that's me yapping about stuff for probably way too long. I hope you're having a good day and that you've, had a good time listening to me yap. Hope you're reading some nice things, and yeah, bye!